Growing up, I always believed my life was perfect. My parents, mom and dad, were loving, caring, and did everything they could to make sure my world was filled with happiness and safety. To the outside world, we were that family, the kind you see in movies or on TV shows where everyone smiles at the dinner table and there's laughter in every room. I remember my childhood home vividly. The bright yellow walls of my room, the smell of mom's cooking drifting from the kitchen, the sound of dad's laughter echoing through the halls. I had everything a kid could ask for: friends, school achievements, birthday parties, and family vacations. But there was always this tiny feeling, almost like a shadow at the edge of my heart, that something wasn't quite right. I brushed it aside. After all, how could my parents, who loved me so much, keep any secrets from me? When I was little, my parents told me stories about our family history, how my grandparents came from a small town and worked hard to give us a better life. They told me about the sacrifices they made, about how important trust and honesty were in our family. I believed them wholeheartedly. I admired their strength and dedication. But none of it prepared me for the truth I would discover years later, after they were gone. It all started one rainy afternoon, just a few months after Dad had passed away. Mom's funeral was still fresh in my mind, and the house felt unbearably empty. I was trying to find some sense of comfort in the things they had left behind, hoping to hold on to some piece of them. That's when I found the letters. I was cleaning out their old desk in the study, something I had avoided because it was too painful to be surrounded by their things without them being there. The desk was cluttered with papers, old photos, and a locked drawer I'd never noticed before. My heart raced as I fumbled with the key I found taped under the drawer. When I finally opened it, I saw a stack of neatly tied letters, yellowed by time, addressed to both Mom and Dad but never sent. Each letter was filled with words I never expected to read, words revealing secrets they had buried deep inside, secrets they had kept from me to protect me. My hands trembled as I read the first letter, written in my mother's delicate handwriting. The letter spoke about a past I had never known. It told the story of a painful choice, a betrayal, and a promise made to keep me safe, no matter what. My whole childhood, it seemed, had been built on a carefully constructed lie. The people I trusted the most had shielded me from a truth so dark it threatened to shatter everything I believed about family, trust, and forgiveness. I remember sinking to the floor, clutching the letters to my chest, tears streaming down my face. How could they keep this from me? Why would they think I couldn't handle the truth? And most importantly, what did it mean for the person I thought I was? That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with questions. The life I knew had changed in an instant. I was no longer the innocent child who trusted blindly. Now, I had to confront the truth my parents had hidden, and it was going to change everything. As the days passed, I became obsessed with uncovering the full story. I searched through every drawer, every photo album, every box in the attic, piecing together the fragments of a life that was never truly mine. With every discovery, the image of my perfect family cracked further, revealing wounds that had never healed. The more I learned, the more I realized that my parents' love had come with a price I was only beginning to understand. Their lie was a shield, yes, but it was also a burden that threatened to tear us apart forever. And so, with a heart full of fear and a desperate need for answers, I set out on a journey to find the truth. It was a journey that would test my faith in family, challenge my ability to forgive, and ultimately, force me to decide who I wanted to be in the face of betrayal. This is my story. The story of a childhood built on a lie, and the painful, beautiful process of uncovering the truth beneath it all. For days after finding the letters, I couldn't concentrate on anything. Every time I tried to eat, sleep, or even watch TV to distract myself, my mind would drift back to that locked drawer and the stack of faded envelopes inside it. I had only read the first letter so far, but even that one had changed everything I thought I knew about my life. It had been written when I was just a baby, less than a year old. Mom's words were shaky, almost desperate. She wrote about someone I didn't know, a woman named Rebecca. She said Rebecca wasn't safe to be around me, and that Dad had agreed to cut all contact with her. She didn't say why, but she described a night that could never be spoken of again. My stomach had twisted as I read those words. Who was Rebecca? And what could she have done that was so bad my parents erased her from our lives entirely? I wanted to throw the letters back into the drawer and pretend I had never seen them, but some part of me knew I couldn't. It was like standing at the edge of a cliff. You're terrified to look down, but you can't stop yourself from leaning forward. On the third night after I found them, I poured myself a cup of tea, sat at the kitchen table, and began reading the rest. The second letter was from my father. His handwriting was rougher, his tone more matter-of-fact, but there was something in the way he wrote that felt heavy, as if the weight of what he was saying had been crushing him for years. He wrote about keeping the promise and never telling me the truth for my own good. He mentioned moving towns to start fresh, and how they had both agreed to rebuild our lives like it never happened. Rebuild. Like it never happened. Those words echoed in my mind. I thought about the small town we had moved to when I was about 4 years old. Back then, I thought it was just because Dad got a new job offer. I never questioned it. But now? Now I was wondering if the real reason was much darker. The third letter was different. It wasn't from my parents. It was addressed to my mom, but signed simply R. My hands shook as I read it. You can't keep her from me forever. She deserves to know who I am. One day she'll find out the truth, and when she does, she'll come looking for me. I'm her real mother, and you can't erase that fact. I dropped the letter like it had burned me. Her real mother? No, that couldn't be right. Mom was my mother. She had to be. She raised me, loved me, held me when I cried, cheered at my school plays, and kissed me goodnight. But the letter said it so plainly, so directly, it didn't feel like an empty threat. It felt like a statement of fact. I sat at the kitchen table for hours, my tea long gone cold, staring at the wall. My thoughts were a mess of anger, disbelief, and fear. Was I adopted? Was Rebecca my biological mother? And if so, why had my parents lied to me all these years? The next morning, I couldn't pretend anymore. I called Aunt Claire, my mom's younger sister. She had always been the fun aunt, the one who let me eat ice cream for breakfast and taught me how to paint my nails. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm but cautious. Hey, sweetheart, how are you holding up? She asked. I almost didn't ask. I almost made small talk, told her I was fine, and hung up. But the words tumbled out before I could stop them. Aunt Claire, who's Rebecca? There was silence. Long, heavy silence. Then, in the quietest voice I'd ever heard her use, she said, You found the letters, didn't you? My heart sank. So it's true? She's my real mother? Claire sighed, and I could hear the strain in her voice. It's not as simple as that. But yes, Rebecca gave birth to you. And your mom, the woman who raised you, took you in when Rebecca couldn't. Couldn't? I repeated, my voice sharper than I intended. Or wasn't allowed to? Another long pause. I could hear her breathing through the phone, could imagine her pacing her kitchen the way she always did when she was nervous. She wasn't safe, Claire finally said. There were problems, bad choices, people she got involved with, things you don't need to know about. But I did need to know. Every word she was holding back felt like another brick on my chest. Why didn't anyone tell me? I demanded. Because your parents thought it was better this way, she said softly. They wanted you to grow up without the chaos, without the danger. They thought they were protecting you. Protecting me. That word again. It sounded noble, but right now it felt like a lie in itself. I thanked her, though it felt hollow, and hung up. My hands were shaking, my breath shallow. I didn't know if I was angry, hurt, or just lost. Probably all three. That night, I pulled out the letters again. I reread Rebecca's words over and over until they blurred on the page. If she really was my biological mother, then what had happened to make her so dangerous? And why was she so sure I'd come looking for her someday? I couldn't stop thinking about it. I couldn't let it go. The lie my parents built my childhood on was no longer something I could ignore. It was the only thing I could think about. And no matter how much it hurt, I knew one thing for sure. I had to find Rebecca. After that phone call with Aunt Claire, it was impossible to go back to my normal life. I'd go to work, smile at my coworkers, even laugh at their jokes, but my mind was always somewhere else, somewhere darker. I'd replay the words from those letters over and over. I'm her real mother. You can't erase that fact. Every time I heard mom's voice in my head, the mom who raised me, I'd feel this gut-twisting mix of love and betrayal. She'd been everything to me. Everything. But she'd also been the one to hide the truth. I knew finding Rebecca wouldn't be easy. My parents had been very deliberate in burying the past, and they'd been good at it. But I also knew that paper trails exist, even for people who want to disappear. The first thing I did was pull out every old document I could find, birth certificates, school records, even my hospital file from when I was born. That's when I noticed something I had never thought about before. On my birth certificate, under Mother, was my mom's name. But the handwriting was different. I'd never paid attention to it, but it didn't match the style of the rest of the form. It looked like it had been filled in later. That tiny detail sent me spiraling. I went to the county clerk's office the next day, pretending I needed a certified copy for work paperwork. The woman behind the desk printed it out for me, but she didn't realize I was studying every line. There it was again, Mom's name, typed neatly. No mention of Rebecca. No hint that anything was unusual. But official documents could be changed. That much I knew. I decided to dig deeper. And by deeper, I mean I went full on detective mode. I combed through online databases, old newspaper archives, and even yearbooks from the town we lived in before we moved. It took hours, days, but finally, I found something. A local news clipping from 25 years ago. The headline was short but chilling. Local woman charged after infant found in unsafe conditions. The woman's name was Rebecca Lane. I stared at her black and white mugshot. She couldn't have been more than 22 at the time, her eyes a strange mix of defiance and exhaustion. There was no mistaking it, the shape of her face, her nose, even the curve of her jaw. It was like looking into a warped mirror of myself. The article was brief. It mentioned neglect, possible endangerment, and that the baby, me, had been taken into protective custody. It also mentioned that the child's welfare has since been placed with a relative. A relative. My mom. I felt my hands go cold, my stomach knotting. So it was true. Rebecca hadn't given me up willingly. She'd lost me. That night, I sat in my living room staring at her face on my laptop screen. She was my biological mother, and until now, I hadn't even known she existed. But the thing that kept me awake wasn't the mugshot. It was the thought of why she'd written to my parents years later. Why she still wanted to find me. And a part of me, one I didn't want to admit to, wanted to find her too. I started with the most obvious search. Facebook. It felt ridiculous, like trying to find a needle in a digital haystack. There were dozens of Rebecca Lanes, but none who looked like her. Then I switched to Instagram. Nothing. It wasn't until I tried an online people search that I found a lead, a Rebecca Lane living 3 hours away in a small coastal town. No photo, just an address. For 2 nights, I stared at that address. I told myself I was just curious, that I had no intention of showing up. But by the 3rd night, curiosity wasn't enough. I had to see her. The drive there was surreal. The whole way, my mind kept bouncing between scenarios. Maybe she'd be thrilled to see me. Maybe she'd cry and apologize for everything. Or maybe she'd slam the door in my face. I didn't know which one scared me more. When I finally pulled up to the address, my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The house was small, weathered, with peeling paint and a crooked mailbox. Wind rattled the chimes hanging by the front door. I sat in my car for a full 5 minutes, staring at it. Every rational part of me screamed to leave, to drive away, to never look back. but my hand was already on the door handle. I walked up the path slowly, my legs heavy. When I reached the door, I hesitated. My finger hovered over the doorbell, then dropped. I knocked instead. For a moment, there was nothing. Then I heard footsteps, slow, cautious. The door opened just enough for me to see her. Rebecca. Her hair was streaked with gray now, her face more worn than the photo I'd seen. But her eyes. Her eyes were exactly like mine. She froze when she saw me, her mouth parting in silent recognition. "It's you," she whispered. I didn't know what to say. My throat felt tight, my mind racing. I think I'm your daughter." Tears welled in her eyes instantly. "You don't have to think," she said. "You are." And just like that, the ground beneath me shifted again. Rebecca stepped back and opened the door wider, her eyes locked on mine like she was afraid I'd vanish if she blinked. The air inside the house smelled faintly of lavender and coffee, but underneath it was something older, a musty scent that made me think of unopened boxes and memories left to gather dust. "Come in," she said softly. I hesitated. Every instinct told me to keep a safe distance, but my feet moved anyway. The living room was small, cluttered with mismatched furniture. Faded photos were scattered across the shelves, some framed, some just leaning against the wall. I couldn't help scanning them, looking for myself, but I didn't see my face anywhere. She motioned for me to sit on the couch while she lowered herself into an armchair opposite me. Her hands trembled slightly as she clasped them together. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was thick enough to choke on. "You look just like I imagined," she finally said, her voice breaking. "I used to wonder every day what your hair looked like, if your eyes stayed the same color, if you still laughed like you did when you were a baby." Her words should have warmed me, but instead they stirred something sharp in my chest. "Why didn't you come for me?" I asked. My voice was quieter than I meant it to be, but it carried every ounce of the anger I'd been holding in. Rebecca's gaze dropped to her lap. "I did," she whispered. "More times than you'll ever know. But they shut the door on me every time. Your parents," she stopped, swallowed hard, then started again. "They made sure I couldn't get close to you." "That's not what they told me," I said, my pulse quickening. "They said you weren't safe. That there were problems, bad choices." Her head snapped up, and I saw a flash of something, hurt, maybe even anger, in her eyes. "Safe?" she repeated. "Do you know what it's like to be 22, broke, and trying to raise a baby alone after your family disowns you?" I was working 3 jobs, sleeping in a friend's basement, barely holding it together. Yes, I made mistakes. But I never hurt you. Not once. I loved you. The room felt too small, like the walls were inching closer. "What about the neglect charges?" I found an article. Rebecca's face tightened. "That night haunts me," she said. "I left you with a friend, someone I thought I could trust, so I could work a late shift. When I came back, the police were already there. They said you were in unsafe conditions. I was arrested before I could even explain. Your mom. She was already in the system as my emergency contact. They called her. She came, and the next thing I knew, she had custody of you. They told me it was temporary, just until I got on my feet." Her voice cracked. But temporary turned into forever. My head spun. Part of me wanted to believe her. Her words were filled with a pain that didn't feel rehearsed. But another part of me remembered the certainty in my parents' letters, their belief that keeping me away from her was the only way to protect me. "They told me they were protecting me," I said, my voice shaking. "That you couldn't be trusted." Rebecca gave a bitter laugh that held no humor. "Protecting you? Or protecting themselves from the truth? Did they ever tell you why I didn't have anyone else to turn to? That your dad—" She stopped herself, pressing her lips together like the rest of that sentence was a dangerous secret. "What about Dad?" I pressed. She shook her head. "I can't. I won't drag you through that unless you really want to know. But if you think they were saints in all this, you're wrong." The way she said it sent a chill through me. My parents had flaws, sure, but in my mind, they were still the good ones in this story. The idea that they might not be shattered that belief like glass. You think I wanted to lose you? She asked, leaning forward, her eyes glistening. I fought. I went to court. I showed up at your school once when you were 6, just to see your face. They called the police on me. Her words pierced something deep in me. A memory stirred, faint and distant, like a dream I'd half forgotten. A strange woman waving at me from the edge of the schoolyard. My teacher ushering me inside quickly. I'd asked about her, but Mom said she was a stranger. I'd believed her. Rebecca's voice softened. I know they loved you. I'm not saying they didn't, but they didn't have to erase me to give you a good life. I didn't realize I was crying until the tears blurred my vision. I don't know who to believe, I admitted. You don't have to believe me, she said quietly. But you deserve the whole story. And the only way to get it is to hear it from both sides. I wiped my face, my mind a whirlwind of questions. Then tell me the rest. Tell me what you're not saying about Dad. Rebecca's hands tightened in her lap. Your dad. He wasn't just my ex's brother. He was. She stopped again, as if the words were caught in her throat. Let's just say the reason your mom got custody wasn't all about me being unfit. There were family deals, debts, and secrets they didn't want getting out. Your dad was right in the middle of it. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just about a custody battle. This was bigger, messier, than I'd ever imagined. Rebecca took a shaky breath. If you want to know everything, you're going to have to be ready for it to hurt. A lot. I sat there, my heart pounding, realizing that I'd already stepped too far into the truth to turn back now. Rebecca's warning echoed in my head. Be ready for it to hurt. But pain didn't scare me anymore. What scared me was living the rest of my life not knowing who I really was. I nodded slowly. Tell me everything. Rebecca leaned back, her eyes locked on mine like she was searching for the strength to rip open wounds she'd spent decades trying to stitch shut. Your dad was my brother-in-law, she began, her voice steady but low. Back then, I was married to his older brother, Daniel. Your dad and I. We were close. Too close. And one night when my marriage was falling apart and your dad and your mom were having problems, we crossed a line. My breath caught in my throat. I gripped the couch cushion, my mind scrambling to process what she was saying. You mean? Yes, she said quietly. You're not just my daughter, you're his daughter too. Your dad. He was both your father and your uncle. And that was a scandal neither of them could afford to let out. My entire body went cold. My father, who I'd admired, who I'd mourned, had been part of this from the beginning. Not just an innocent bystander, but a participant in the lie. They kept it quiet, Rebecca continued. Your mom forgave him publicly, but privately. She never did. She made me out to be the villain, told everyone I'd been unstable and reckless, and in court, that's the story she stuck to. She knew if my name was dragged through the mud, no one would believe my side. And it worked. She got full custody. I got nothing. Her voice cracked for the first time. I lost you. And not because I didn't want you, but because I was the easiest one to blame. I wanted to speak, to argue, to scream, but no words came. My head was spinning with images of my parents at the dinner table, holding hands, laughing like they'd been the perfect couple. All of it, every smile, every bedtime story, had been built on a foundation of secrets and betrayal. Rebecca wiped her eyes and continued. I tried for years to get my life together, to prove I could be the mother you deserved. But every door I knocked on was closed before I even had a chance. Your parents didn't just protect you from me, they erased me. And I hated them for it. But I never stopped loving you. I stared at her, feeling like the room was tilting. So all those years, all the times I thought they were protecting me, they were really protecting themselves? Yes, she said. They were afraid of losing you. Afraid of what you'd think if you knew the truth. Afraid of what it would do to the family's reputation. And they knew that if you grew up loving them and distrusting me, you'd never go looking for answers. It was like my whole life had been flipped upside down. My parents, my heroes, had lied not just to me, but to everyone. They had painted themselves as my saviors, while keeping the ugliest parts of the story buried deep. I left Rebecca's house that evening with my head pounding, the ocean wind cold against my tear-streaked face. The drive home felt endless, my thoughts swinging wildly between grief, rage, and a strange, aching relief. Relief that I finally knew the truth, even if it shattered me. When I got home, I pulled out the letters again. This time, I read them differently. The love in my parents' words was still there, but now I could see the fear between the lines, the desperate, calculated effort to keep me from the one truth they couldn't bear for me to learn. For days, I didn't speak to anyone. I ignored calls from Aunt Claire, skipped work, and sat alone in the house that now felt foreign. I walked past family photos and saw them for what they really were, carefully curated snapshots of a life that wasn't what it seemed. But eventually, the anger started to dull, not because I forgave them, but because I realized forgiveness wasn't about letting them off the hook. It was about freeing myself from the prison of their choices. One rainy afternoon, I wrote Rebecca a letter. I told her I wasn't ready to call her Mom, but I wanted to get to know her. I wanted to hear her stories, see her photos, learn the parts of my history that had been stolen from me. I didn't promise her anything beyond that, but I promised myself I wouldn't run from the truth anymore. A week later, she wrote back. Her handwriting was shaky, but the words were steady. No matter what they told you, you've always been mine. And now, you'll finally get to decide for yourself who I am to you. I keep that letter tucked inside the same drawer where I found the ones my parents left behind. Sometimes I read them all together, their version, her version, and I realize there's no way to untangle the full truth from the lies. Life isn't that clean. What I do know is this. My childhood may have been built on a lie, but the person I am now is built on surviving it. And while I can't change what happened, I can choose what comes next. For the first time in my life, the truth is mine,